the Indian story is probably now resounding more and more. I think the geopolitical stance that India has taken, I think in many ways also not responding to everything, but standing by themselves, standing with strength. I think that also has been taken positively.
So certain things on the manufacturing side we have to, uptake, because at 16-17% of our GDP in manufacturing is very low. Services being most like 60%, manufacturing needs to come to around 25%.
I think in this world of geopolitical uncertainty, it's good to have a large domestic market. That's the best insurance you can have.
Something that worked very well was the GST Council. This is a forum in which states and center work together. And in spite of all the constraints, it seems to have worked very well.
I think the challenge is to change the mindsets of bureaucracy down the line.
A power-packed panel here at the ET House in Davos. We have some of India Inc.'s tallest leaders here representing India Inc. in Davos, and today we will get to hear from them. We'll try and get a sense of what's the narrative in Davos, what are the conversations here, what's the confidence around the Indian economy, and what indeed are the reforms Indian economy should undertake to perform even better than we are doing. We'll start with Mr. Memani. You're a long-time Davos goer, as it were. Could you give us a sense of, and I'll come to all the panelists with the same question, give us a sense of what is the narrative around India this time around in Davos? Early days in this Davos season, but what are you picking up from your meetings and conversations?
Yeah. Thank you very much, SK. I think as you rightly said, I think it's just started, so I think we'll get a better sense later on. But overall, I would say, the Indian story is probably now resounding more and more. Firstly, I think the numbers are there to speak for itself. And secondly, relative to what's happening in the rest of the world, I think it comes out very well. The other area I would say is the number of trade deals that India is doing. Whether it's when you look at the Oceania area, or you look at Asia Pac, or you look at Middle East, and obviously there's a large attendance from Europe in Davos. I think that definitely, trade deals really help in building these bridges and platforms, which is more than just tariffs that goes both sides, but also it just builds that trust and relationship. And you can see more and more people visiting India who are now here or their teams have visited, and much greater engagement. And also I think the communication around what's happening in reforms in India, I think that's also getting stronger. So people are keen to understand, is it really changing? What's happening on the ground? This is what happened earlier, what happens now? So those kind of conversations are happening. So I would say overall, very positive. I think the geopolitical stance that India has taken, I think in many ways also not responding to everything, but standing by themselves. Standing with strength. I think that also has been taken positively.
Rajan, let me come to you. You are another very familiar face in Davos. Give us a sense of what's the narrative this time.
I think India remains a bright spot. One particular issue which this government has picked up, and rightly so, and I have to say, personally, I would say I would proven wrong that India could actually not get into the manufacturing side. The results are showing. It's a good start, let's say that, but we have to move much faster on that. So certain things on the manufacturing side we have to, uptake, because at 16-17% of our GDP in manufacturing is very low. Services being most like 60%, manufacturing needs to come to around 25%. The global situation being what it is, especially the political situation, and it's a dynamic situation, I have to say. Things were quite constant in our previous life, let me say that. Yes. The new dispensation, what happens next morning is anybody's guess. Yeah. So it's difficult to say when something is spoken tomorrow morning, how will that change the landscape?
Mr. Godrej, could I come to you with the same question?
Yes, I agree with both the previous speakers. And the geopolitical situation, as they said, has had effects on India, but surprisingly, it has not affected the overall economy. There have been compensating factors. When we had tariffs from the US, we were able to increase our trade to other countries. Yesterday, there was a report that the threats that the US is putting on Europe is increasing Indian trade with Europe. So it looks like every time a threat comes, someone in India sees an opportunity, and the net result is no harm done to the Indian economy. And the good thing is Indian business is very resilient. And I entirely agree that we need to increase manufacturing, and we also need to increase innovation in India. India spends very little on R&D, and this is a huge opportunity, especially if we want to grow even faster. And today, Chandrababu Naidu and Rajiv was presiding over the meeting, said two important points. He said from ease of economy, we need to ease of business, we need to go to speed of business. And the other important point he made was that we need to grow well above double digits. Yeah.
So Narendran, can I come to you with the same question? What's the narrative around India that you've been in Davos?
I think pretty much similar to what the others said. India is certainly more and more visible. Earlier, it was largely the tech companies and India as a country and maybe Andhra Pradesh as a state, maybe 10, 12 years back. I think there are 10 states represented here, which is great because most people who don't know India don't understand the complexity of India. So to understand the different value propositions that each of these states offer, and I think it's great for someone looking at India. I think in this world of geopolitical uncertainty, it's good to have a large domestic market. That's the best insurance you can have. So companies are realizing that you can build global scale in India for the Indian market. And of course, you're competitive enough to be able to export to the world.
Let me pick up with you on that. I mean, you run a large global company with a lot of supply chain interlinkages, various global markets and so on. Let me pick up with you on the question that Rajan pointed out about, we used to be able to take for granted at least some alliances and some friendships. Given all that has happened in the last year and a half or so, the whole world seems to be, I mean, we are hardly unique in being impacted. But is there do you think nations will, look at this episode and think that there is a fundamental reset that is needed in terms of how you think of alliances? Or will this be looked at as an aberration and will things largely go back to normal at some point?
When you build global supply chains, the last thing you want is the risk that we've been experiencing over the last few years, either in terms of tariff actions or in terms of supply chain disruptions. So I think typically companies will look at optimizing supply chains around resilience and risk rather than just cost optimization. Traditionally, over the last 100 years, it's been on cost optimization. I think that world is behind us. So you will look at risk, you will look at resilience, you look at the vulnerability of the supply chains. If you're
Geopolitical de-risking.
Absolutely. I mean, who thought that Europe and the US will have such a difficult relationship?
Yeah.
We sell steel from Netherlands to US, which has a 50% duty plus 10% if I go by this week's news. And UK has, we export from the UK to the US, which now has a 25% duty. So this was not something we had, neither had we planned for it, nor did our customers in the US plan for it.
Right.
So it's really encouraging a reset, and particularly when you're looking at capital intensive businesses, you don't invest for the next few months, you invest for the next couple of decades at least, right? So you need to factor all these risks.
Rajiv, on that point, let me come to you. Now, India's strategy broadly appears to have been at the face of the adversity that has emerged from the United States in the form of punishing tariffs. It has been to, one, focus more on domestic market or double down on domestic markets. Two, to focus on other FTAs and partnerships with other regions. And three, to double down on reforms so that the productivity of the Indian economy itself goes up. Cumulatively, would you say these measures will more than counterbalance the loss coming from restrictions in the US?
I wouldn't like to do a maths on it, but I would think that anything that creates greater economic value added within the country is absolutely critical. Not just from I think what we need to do from reforms and what we need to do to encourage manufacturing in India. Honestly, whether even if the US, treaty would have been done, I think, we still have to do it. I think we are very focused on US. India's biggest challenge, in my view, is from the east. I think US will get, it will get sorted out. I think it's a question of time. It will get sorted out. I think there is a lot of complementarity in the relationship. There are lots of people who know each other well. It's a matter of time. It will get done. I think the positive side of that has been that India has been proactive in building other relationships. I think the reforms and the manufacturing, focusing on that is very important to counter what's happening in one geography in the world. So when you are having, anti-dumping, or when you are having dumping, or when the domestic industry is threatened, we should do a quick analysis and see whether MIP has to be imposed, whether anti-dumping duty has to be imposed. Once that's done by one ministry, then hopefully, the other ministry should accept it. I mean, right now what we're seeing is that, it goes from one ministry, it goes from the main ministry to the Ministry of Commerce, then it goes to Ministry of Finance. And a lot of times one approves, the other rejects, so I think it's tough. I mean, 60-70% of that, of the applications, 70-75% are getting rejected. So I think it's a real challenge. So I think
Sorry, 70% of the applications for
anti-dumping that industry applies today, even if they are approved by one ministry, finally get after 7, 8 months, 9 months, get rejected. Now we know, I think there have been various things coming, that the volumes are growing of exports from one country. Their pricing is down by 25%. They have massive capacity build-up that's happened, that's not slowing down. Their domestic market is not that strong. And they are correctly and rightly, in their economic interest, trying to use that to flood global markets.
Right.
So those countries like India, which have large domestic markets, where we need to engage much more from an employment standpoint, we have to create greater manufacturing capacity. Therefore, I really applaud the reforms that the government is doing, and some of the changes that they are looking at doing. But we need to carry on with speed.
Yeah. Mr. Narendran, is there anything you would like to add to on the point of how further India can succeed in manufacturing?
Yeah, I think it's a big one, right? I mean, honestly, if you look at manufacturing and services, right? Why did services exports take off? You had a good telecom infrastructure, you had good labor arbitrage, light regulatory touch, right? Manufacturing is just the opposite of all that, right? To build a factory, you need to acquire land, you need clearances, you have a lot of problems to solve. So I think in manufacturing, you need to take a longer term strategic view. The biggest success story in manufacturing in India has been auto industry, right? And we have global auto companies in India, investing capital in India, building plants in India, exporting out of India. India is exporting almost 800,000 cars now.
That's right.
Right? You also have auto component sector where you have a lot of world-class companies which has been created. But that's happened because the auto sector had some support and protection. If you had 10% import duty on cars in 1990, I don't think you would have had an auto industry in India. You would have brought cars from Thailand or Malaysia or wherever else. There was already scale of production. Same thing is happening in electronics. You have the support, you created that ecosystem, you have $50 billion of exports this year, plus an electronics ecosystem like the auto component ecosystem has been created. So I think in manufacturing, you need to take a longer term view so that you get the best of foreign capital into India. You negate some of the disadvantages we have outside the factory gates. I think Indian manufacturing is capable of building world-class competitiveness inside the factory gate. But if the cost of land, time taken to acquire land, time taken to set up a factory, cost of capital, logistics costs, all this can cost you anything from $50 to $100, which is more than the profitability of most manufacturing companies. Right? So I think we need to take that view, decide what are the sectors which are critical for the country, support them for 2-3 decades, help them build global scale and competitiveness. And that's what globally countries have done. Not most recently China.
Rajan, what Narendran has so eloquently articulated, does it resonate with you?
Absolutely. I think the quality side, I can tell you, India is actually right up there. But the value chain that goes post when you actually go out of the factory, which is the logistic, the power cost, the capital cost, the labor, I think those are the issues. And manufacturing has to be led by states. While we see here 10 states, as in the said, they have to, honestly take a viewpoint that they need to actually make the life easier for the manufacturing sector. Electronics, we are saying is we are touting it as a big success. Yes, it's a big success. But today the contribution is only 16-17%. We have to go to 50, 60%, which means you need the ecosystem around it for all the components. There's no point with 15, 16% getting all the components from our neighboring countries. We don't want to be an assembly line. So India has to find as golden mean, where do we want to stack? Do we want to be just the lower manufacturing country, or do we want to have a value add manufacturing country? Without value add, I can tell you, will not be a successful country from manufacturing.
So let me ask you on this, on the point of reforms. India has undertaken a lot of structural reforms over the past few years, and now there is a committee headed by the cabinet secretary. They're looking into. I mean, there is certainly now a sense that there is appetite for deep structural reforms, even without a major crisis externally. But one of the issues is that regulations that impact Indian businesses, they span across center and states. If you need to open a restaurant in Bombay, in Mumbai, you still need 36 different licenses. But there is no coordinated effort across the center and the states to in some way make sure that entrepreneurs who want to set up a factory or a restaurant or any kind of small business, it's radically deregulated. Is there a solution to this?
This has always been a problem with our constitution because we have a federation of states. So there are state laws, federal laws, and some things are state subjects, some things are federal subjects. But something that worked very well was the GST Council. This is a forum in which states and center work together. And in spite of all the constraints, it seems to have worked very well. And the recent GST reforms shows that a lot should be possible. I wonder if it would be possible to have some such council for other reforms as well, where the center and the state work together.
Right. Absolutely. Rajiv, one of the consequences of this kind of an economy is that, when you have a lot of regulation, obviously, the large companies are able to navigate it because they can have dedicated manpower for compliance to work around it and all of that. The real punishment in that sense, or really the person who gets throttled, is the small entrepreneur and your MSMEs. And sure enough, our MSME sector, has a lot of room for growing further, being more integral to the economy. Do you see, as Mr. Godrej said, a great suggestion on reforms, a federal plus states, a joint body on reforms? One, what's your prescription to solve this problem? And two, are you hopeful that we can meaningfully change the situation?
Yeah, I think the challenge is to change the mindsets of bureaucracy down the line. See, the real harassment happens when the inspector enters your factory.
100%.
He will come and he'll say, okay, this coat is hanging like this, but actually you needed two. You can't hand six in one. This thing you have to hand two. And if you don't do that, by the way, there's a criminal prosecution if you don't do criminal prosecution. And the MSME guy shakes. So what will that poor guy do? So that's the challenge we are having. So I think apart from changing regulation, I think if you talk to the top politicians, if you talk to the senior bureaucrats, I think they're all on. But the inspector Raj that is there on the ground, I think that is out of control.
Yeah.
And I think that is where the MSMEs are really impacted.
Yeah.
And I think that my only sense is that the only way, one is you have to reduce, you have to trust more, which I think Rajan said was absolutely correct. But you can't trust 100%. So you have to trust more. And third is you have to find technology. So anytime you file an application, anytime you do this, it should be on the number of days it's taking, why it's not being cleared, what are the reasons for that. I'm sure people will still find loops around that. But it's a very gradual process that we'll have to improve on. So we have to find a way that we increase the risk appetite and reduce the regulation if you really want the MSMEs to flourish in a significant way.
And on that note, I'm going to come to you, Mr. Narendran. When you look at our top line numbers, they're very impressive. We could, of course, a country like ours needs double-digit growth, but 8% is nothing to, for a large economy, it's nothing to scoff at. However, some of the signs around it don't, as many commentators are now pointing out, are not in sync with the headline numbers. FDI, for instance, which used to be, growing at a really fast clip, used to be very healthy, has declined and is now almost anemic kind of a growth. FIIs we've seen moving away strongly. You're a global investor. What do you think is MS?
So, we should not assume that good demand alone will solve the problem. Okay. I think corporates look at good demand and a profitable business. They look at cash flows. The good thing in India is a lot of corporates have repaired their balance sheets over the last 8-10 years, right? So we are in a good shape as companies. But if you're looking at private sector investment, which is happening, but maybe not as much as people like it to happen, then you not only need to see good demand, you need to see profitable growth so that you're not hurting your balance sheet a few years down the line, right? And global companies also look at that. They look at the profitability of the growth, not just growth. And I think that needs to be appreciated and nurtured because I think, like I said, India has the advantage that you can build scale by just servicing the domestic market. You can build global scale by servicing the domestic market. So there's no reason why you can't attract FDI if you make sure the conditions are right. And there is FDI coming, may not be as much as one would have expected given that it's a 7% kind of growth economy. But the steps the government has taken, the steps many of the states are taking, I think points us in the right direction.
One of the structural issues on the Indian economy right now, as indeed Arvind Subramanian and many others have pointed out, is that the commanding heights of the economy, which used to be said that at one point is the state, but now you have large conglomerates who have gained disproportionate share of both top line and profits. I mean, while these are all large and respected conglomerates, and they provide tremendous service to the economy, add great value, but structurally, isn't it a problem? Don't you need more widespread distribution of gains from business and profits? And wouldn't this pose a social problem in the long run?
No, I think the point is very valid. You need inclusive growth, right, to have it to make it sustainable growth, right? So the paradox is that you do need large companies to compete globally, right? Global scale is very different today, right? One of the challenges Europe has is while it has many companies who are global scale, they don't have the scale that you see in the US, right? Because it's been a single market, but not like as much of a single market as the US is, right? At the same time, you need a very strong MSME sector that you said. There is no large economy which doesn't have a strong MSME sector, particularly a large manufacturing economy. But those MSMEs are world-class. They may not be big, but they're world-class in what they produce and they compete, right? So if you look at Germany, you look at Italy, Korea, Japan, China for that matter, all have very strong MSME sectors. So we need both. You need the big ones to build global scale. Also, don't forget the fact that the big conglomerates have long supply chains. Right? There are at least 2,000 companies who deal, let's say, with us as Tata Steel. So we have a role to play in bringing them to a certain level of quality, competitiveness, etc. So I think big companies have a role, small companies have a role. But yes, the fact that a lot of the society felt left behind by globalization in the West is what has translated into the political outcomes that we have seen in Europe or in the US. And we need to be conscious of that, and we need to work on that. I mean, I see that Jharkhand is one of your partner states.
Indeed.
In eastern India, we have some of the richest parts of the country below the ground, but some of the poorest parts of the country above the ground. Because we've not been able to translate that wealth, geological wealth that India is blessed with,
absolutely,
into inclusive growth, right? So the local populations don't trust industry. Industry has its own challenges. The governments are trying their best. But unless all these things come together, and every state need not do everything, I think we need to see which are the states which need to have geologically based industries, which are the states which are fertile, which needs food processing, which are the states which are better for electronics or better for data centers or whatever. So, and I think that kind of an approach will help us bring more inclusive growth at the state level.
Right. A great comprehensive discussion here at the ET House in Davos. We heard how India continues to be a real bright spot in the global economy, how the structural advantages the country has, a large domestic market, an immense talent pool, and the demographic dividend stands us in good stead. We also had a very real discussion about the challenges we have. We talked about the need for reforms across the center-state divide. We talked about the need to strengthen the MSME sector. We talked about alliances and friendships, and how in the in the constantly evolving geopolitical risk scenario, how to stay stable. We talked about IT and AI and how India can be a leader in all of this. Thank you to all our esteemed panelists today for a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, SK. Thank you very much.